At a celebration for the opening of a new branch of the Gotham National Bank, the party is crashed by a sinister group of criminals known as the Red Hood Gang. One among them, codenamed Red Hood 5, is ordered to attack one of the hostages, and he puts the man down quickly, complaining the blow broke his gun. The leader of the Red Hood Gang gives the man his gun, saying Red Hood 5 should use it on himself. The real Red Hood 5 loves killing and would never hit what he could shoot. Also, he's left-handed. This stranger begs Red Hood 1 to spare those around them, which makes the gang leader laugh. They're all already dead, as they poisoned the cake used at the party yesterday. At gunpoint, the imposter is ordered to put a gun to his mouth, but the leader of the sinister gang gets impatient. This is all getting old, so Bruce Wayne decides to make things new. In the ensuing chaos, Wayne is able to escape the Red Hood Gang and make it back to his headquarters. Though he is now calling this place home, Alfred hasn't given up on the notion of them returning to Wayne Manor. Yet Bruce is determined to operate out of this building, here in the heart of Gotham, only 40 feet from the site where his parents were slain, back when he was a child. This way, he's in the thick of things, dealing with the crime that he is attempting to fight. Assessing his recent, early attempts to inflict war against all forms of crime, Bruce notes that while he is improving, he needs to find a way to operate in the shadows undetected. Something in his operation is missing. Later, Commissioner Gordon stops by, asking about a vigilante scene operating in the area with advanced technology, as well as concerns about the direction of Wayne Enterprises. Bruce offers him very little, as he has been away from the city for a long time and is no longer involved with how his family's business is run. Meanwhile, the Red Hood Gang begins to take an interest in Bruce Wayne's new home. Little did any of these people know, this was the beginning of the 0 year. In the days that follow, Bruce successfully rescues a group of men from the Red Hood Gang, and remains more determined than ever to learn the identity of the ruthless and mysterious leader of the organization. Apparently, Red Hood 1 simply blackmails and threatens ordinary Gotham citizens into joining his gang, and the sporadic activity of the group makes it very difficult to track and learn what they're up to. Alfred asks if Bruce is ready to publicly return to the world, but he states he prefers to remain legally dead, as Bruce Wayne currently is. The loyal butler is happy to have Bruce back in his life after he's been gone so long, but seems dismayed at how much the man has changed. Wayne states he was gone for a reason, training for this new crusade, and nothing is going to change his plans now. The head of Wayne Enterprises, Bruce's uncle, a man named Philip Kane, then arrives, having been keeping a close eye out for Bruce's return. He takes Wayne to the new Wayne Enterprises building, talking about some of the incredible work they've done since merging the corporation with the two family businesses of Wayne Enterprises and Kane Chemicals. However, Bruce is quick to point out the company is also now manufacturing weapons. Though Wayne might not approve personally, he does also state that the company does belong to Philip and that he doesn't want to get involved in the business. Kane, however, doesn't share those feelings, stating that he worked hard to keep this company alive not just for his daughter, but also Bruce Wayne. He states that it was always the Waynes that captured the city's attention and that having one back in charge of the company would make a huge difference for the spirit of Gotham. Bruce reaffirms that's not why he has returned to Gotham, so Philip turns the younger man's attention to the giant penny he poured in front of Wayne Enterprises for the new building. Kane had this made as he originally studied to be a geologist, but went to work for the family business after his father passed away. Philip states that sometimes we have to give important things up to do what needs to be done. Bruce, however, remains firm that this is not who he is, prompting his uncle to wonder what kind of man his nephew has become. In the distant past, while Bruce's father was working on a car, he once gave his son a special camera that maps out difficult terrain by filming in all directions at once. As a young boy, Bruce decided to take it and venture out into the caves located under the estate of his family home. He fell into that cave and was attacked by a swarm of bats. Late at night, Philip states Wayne is not coming around and seems reluctant to return to the business world. His top strategist said that Bruce would do as much. Kane is frustrated as he hoped Bruce could salvage the company's reputation within Gotham. The people of the city hate them for what they built here, and the Red Hood gang seems intent on stealing from Wayne Enterprises no matter what kind of security they get. Kane's strategist, Edward Nigma, says it's not a mystery they're dealing with, but a riddle. And though riddles always seem complicated, they often have simple, hidden answers. The answer to all of Philip's problems also merits a simple solution: the death of Bruce Wayne. In Arkham, Bruce breaks into the facility in order to access files on the Red Hood gang. He's discovered by a patient who reacted violently to his trespassing. While Bruce manages to slip away, the woman, known as the Anchoress, is then considered violent from that point on by Arkham authorities. She's punished for acting out in response to Wayne's actions, and winds up suffering immense mental trauma from it. It would only be years later that Bruce would learn of this mistake, but even then, there's no changing the damage done along the way in the journey towards him becoming something new and better. Red Hood 1 then stages an attack on a blimp. On board the aircraft, a major figure in the crime world of Gotham named Luca Falcone was initially unimpressed by the invasion, not realizing his own men have already joined with the Red Hood. Oswald Cobblepot states that this was an unnecessary move by Red Hood 1. After all, they're just businessmen. But the Red Hood gang's leader pays this no mind. He knows Oswald uses Gotham's poor regulation around these blimps to smuggle in all sorts of illegal goods, including weapons, such as this Wayne sonic rifle. Non-lethal until augmented by the right hands, such as the Red Hood gang, who has already augmented these weapons before Oswald even shipped them in. Cobblepot suddenly lashes out with electrified gloves, and Red Hood 1 quickly realizes it's the vigilante that has been attacking the Red Hood gang for some time. The Red Hood 1 is thoroughly impressed, and even makes room in his gang for the stranger to join up with them. Bruce refuses the offer and once again barely escapes with his life. This frustrates Wayne, who feels he is already losing his newly started war on crime. The Red Hood gang's numbers and resources keep expanding at a frightening rate, now absorbing rival gangs, whereas before they only took in people with no criminal past. Though Bruce managed to get a DNA sample of their leader, it doesn't match any known records, while this leader's actions seem to involve striking out at random, seemingly just to prove what the gang is capable of. The police are getting desperate while the city is now gripped with fear. And now, the Red Hood gang has access to Wayne Tech, further cementing Bruce's anger. Pennyworth, however, is getting frustrated with all of this, pointing out that Bruce is being a coward hiding from his real identity. This culminates in an argument where the butler states that Bruce's parents would be ashamed that he let the family legacy get to this point, where the company name has become associated with criminals. And when Bruce grabs him in anger, Alfred ultimately slaps his adoptive son and leaves for Wayne Manor. With all this in mind, that night, Bruce decides to meet with Philip Kane at a museum around midnight. There, when Wayne informs Kane about the stolen weapons, Philip simply states they will have to further increase security. Bruce, however, points out that at this point the Red Hood gang is basically everywhere, and the best thing to do is to stop production at Wayne Enterprises before the gang steals any more of it. Philip asks one last time if Bruce will come back to the company and into the public eye, if he cares so much. But when Wayne once again refuses, Kane decides to force his nephew's hand. The lights of the museum flash on, and in front of a large, well-connected crowd, along with a number of key individuals from the press, Kane introduces Bruce Wayne, stating he has returned to help build Wayne Enterprises to new heights. Though Bruce storms off, the damage is done. The world now knows Bruce Wayne is back. Wayne passes by an Egyptian exhibit where he is greeted by Edward Nigma. Nigma hints to Wayne that his uncle may be deliberately supplying weapons to the Red Hood gang. He also gives Bruce a riddle about how to escape the museum while avoiding the press, which Wayne manages to solve easily. As Wayne leaves, Nigma muses on how many more riddles are on the way. While Bruce returns home in a cab, he calls Alfred, stating things are much worse than he realized, and that Bruce was wrong. As he enters his home, he's surprised to find another party set up for him. His taxi driver gets out of the car and puts on the Red Hood. The gang leader states he was sad that they couldn't make Wayne's party, so they decided to throw another one for Bruce here. Red Hood also jokes that it's a shame they have to do this too, since Bruce Wayne tips so well. In the distant past, Bruce's father called out to him, but the boy was lost, alone in the cave. Eventually, he was found and hospitalized. In the present, Wayne is overwhelmed by flames. The Red Hood gang appears and begin to pummel the wealthy man, all while Red Hood 1 gloats, saying he was inspired by the death of Bruce's parents, and is honored to be able to now kill their son. Bruce is left for dead by the gang, but with great effort, he manages to escape his now former home before it burns down, and drag himself all the way to Wayne Manor. At Wayne Enterprises headquarters, Philip Kane pulls a gun on Edward Nygma. He is outraged that Nygma had Wayne targeted. Assuming his nephew is now dead because of it, Philip bitterly declares that Bruce was a better man than either of them, and didn't deserve to be killed. Edward agrees and calmly tries to talk Philip down, explaining he did this because Bruce would have taken the company over eventually, given his life history. But Kane remains furious and intent on murdering Nygma in revenge. When Edward points out the police would easily deduce their working relationship, Philip explains he can wipe out Nygma's electronics and their records with a giant magnet installed under Nygma's office, all controlled by a simple voice-activated password. But in proof of Edward Nygma's genius, he's able to turn the tables on Kane, when Edward correctly states the password himself, activating the magnet early and pinning Philip to the ground thanks to a metal plate in the man's skull. Edward packs up his things, disappointed in Kane, but certain others will find use of him in the city. Kane points out that nobody has ever actually heard of Edward Nygma, so all his skills and intellect are of no use to a world that's never heard of him. Nygma pauses at this before simply saying goodbye. At Wayne Manor, Bruce wakes up, badly injured, but successfully patched together by Alfred after the man discovered his unconscious body. The two start to make amends, with Alfred promising that, no matter how much the two might fight, Pennyworth will always be there to patch up his boy. That night, Bruce walks the ground of the mansion and speaks out to his father. He is failing in his war on crime. He is squandering his family legacy. Holding the camera his father once gave him, he asks for a way back on the path he has chosen, begging to be shown the way. The camera activates, and around the man appears images of the cave he was once trapped in as a boy. And so, Bruce sees it. Yes, Father, I shall become a bat. In the days that follow, Bruce and Alfred set up a forge in the caves below and begin to work. Wayne admits what they are doing is sheer madness, but Alfred is much more encouraging, saying it is exactly this sort of madness that the city most rewards. Later, while the Red Hood gang initiates a robbery, they debate some of the rumors swirling of a shadow that has been striking out against the Red Hoods, though most are dismissive of these claims, saying Gotham has always been home to crazy stories about witches and owls. They are wrong. Rumors of Batman quickly swirl through the city, which catches the attention of Red Hood 1. Bruce meanwhile observes that the gang leader seems to be planning something involving the theft of chemicals, but struggles to make sense of what the gang's true goals are at this time. At Alfred's suggestion, Bruce goes to Philip, who is shocked to see his nephew alive, and he's even apologetic for how Bruce almost died, admitting his involvement in these things. Kane initially worked with the Red Hood gang thinking he could control them, but was quickly proven otherwise. Bruce promises he can help, but Philip knows very little, and is clearly terrified after he shows Bruce that the gang recently forcibly initiated Kane into their gang by branding the older businessman. With Philip realizing it is too late for him to get out of this, he turns over access to the company's files to his nephew, while Wayne admits to his uncle that he was wrong to want to stay in the shadows as Bruce Wayne. In the makeshift beginnings of his new headquarters underneath Wayne Manor, Bruce tells Alfred that he still hasn't figured out the Red Hood's plan, but thinks it will take more than just Batman. And so Bruce then appears publicly in front of a crowd of reporters, speaking for his love of the city in spite of all its flaws. He states that the Red Hood gang tried to kill him and has the city gripped in fear, but he challenges the citizens of Gotham to rise up against these terrorists. He shows the reporters that the building they are standing in front of, Ace Chemicals, is where the Red Hood gang is using all the goods they have stolen to concoct this master plan. As he very publicly reveals the Red Hood gang's plans, a group of them attack with a barrage of missiles. In the chaos, Bruce flees and contacts Alfred. It's time for the next phase of their plan, which Alfred enacts as both Bruce and the Gotham police, under the command of Jim Gordon, move in to Ace Chemicals. Inside, Bruce is caught by Red Hood 1, who locks the police out while Bruce is held captive. The gang leader is impressed, as Bruce not only deduced they were working here, but that the man planned on attacking tomorrow on the anniversary of the Wayne murders in Crime Alley. As the crime lord prepares to execute Wayne, Station, we're circling back to get a better look. Yeah, massive outage. They're saying the whole neighborhood.
Donnie, what the hell is that?
In the darkness, the Red Hood gang puts on night vision goggles, and thanks to an illusion created through these goggles, which just so happened to be Wayne Tech, the criminals witness what appears to be Bruce Wayne getting saved by Batman, and then the Dark Knight strikes. Battling his way through a massive crowd of the Red Hood gang, Batman is nearly shot by the Red Hood 1, but is saved by Red Hood 347. Only for 347 to be fatally shot by the gang leader himself when the seemingly random criminal misses his initial attack. But Batman recognizes the number and rushes to the fallen man, knowing it is Philip Kane. As the entire facility goes up in flames around them, Red Hood 1 flees with the sole remaining canister of chemicals they had been preparing, the rest having now been destroyed. Bruce briefly grieves for his fallen uncle when he is then surrounded by the police. Bruce tries to get Gordon to step back from them, and ultimately has to force the lieutenant back with a shot from a beanbag gun to save the officer from a falling steel beam. At this, Gordon decides it is best just to focus on getting everyone out of the burning building, and lets Batman go. The Dark Knight chases after Red Hood 1, and the two wind up on the catwalks of the chemical factory, as an inferno now burns around them. Batman manages to knock down Red Hood 1 with a devastating blow to the head, and though Wayne tries to rescue the criminal, instead, the man willingly drops into a vat of chemicals. At Wayne Manor, Alfred approaches the grandfather clock, and enters through a secret door. Approaching Bruce, the two discuss the finished cave, with the butler remarking on how clever it was to begin the career of Batman with the rescue of Bruce Wayne, even leaking the goggle footage to the press. The separation of the two men is now part of the founding mythology of Batman. Still, part of Bruce doubts all of this, and worries this will all be discovered within a week. They talk of Red Hood 1, whose body was never recovered and remains a mystery. Various people high up in the Red Hood gang thought that the man behind the mask was Liam DeStahl, only for Liam to turn up dead at Amusement Mile. Though he did seem to be the original leader of the Red Hood gang, some mystery figure at some point took his place and took over the criminal operation. Bruce contemplates the possibilities, wondering who he fought when, while Alfred talks about what Batman can be. He suggests that perhaps if Bruce plays things right, people might not want to know who is behind the mask, and reassures Bruce that so far, he's been playing the role magnificently. The two apologize for their earlier fight, when suddenly, a video is broadcast all over Gotham. Edward Nygma appears, introducing himself as the Riddler. As he challenges the city to a riddle, the power suddenly flashes out. Enigma states it's time for the games to begin. In the weeks that follow the Riddler's first blackout of the city, things are plunged into chaos as a heavy storm closes in on Gotham. As it builds up into a superstorm event, James Gordon is captured while attempting to bring down a crooked cop named Zachary Henshaw, who secretly works for a crime lord named Roman Sionis. Henshaw and his crew try to kill him in a staged suicide by throwing Gordon over a bridge, but the man manages to survive the encounter. Still, the police lieutenant feels overwhelmed. Ever since the Red Hood gang, costume criminals have been on the rise, while the mysterious new vigilante seems to be handling them in a way the police can't, or are simply unwilling to. Gordon storms the local police station and attacks Henshaw, but is held at gunpoint by another crooked cop, his own partner. Luckily, James is saved by Detective Harvey Bullock. In the days that follow, the corrupted police officers affiliated with Sionis are successfully rooted out and arrested thanks to Gordon. But Roman escapes police custody and disappears, while those arrested are all suspiciously killed in clearly staged accidents. The entire affair is embarrassing enough to force the resignation of Police Commissioner Loeb, who suggests that James Gordon has a bright future ahead of him in the Gotham City Police Department. As the storm closes in and gets worse, Gordon thinks back to how he was flung off the bridge. He would have never survived that fall, but the man signaled for help, and somehow, help came. On a Gotham City subway train before the blackout, a young man named Luke Fox and his friend Russ are accosted by a group of criminals. Luke, while trained in martial arts, is easily able to subdue them, but Russ is dismayed at this behavior, fearing retaliation. Luke manages to calm the boy down and maintain their friendship, which is good because Russ is badly bullied at school and could use a friend. In the days that follow, as the storm begins to descend on Gotham, Russ begins to shut Luke out of his life. Fox becomes so worried about him he is distracted and ambushed by the gang he picked a fight with, just before they prepare to outright execute the young man. Luke is able to fight off the criminals with the Dark Knight. As he turns to thank his rescuer, the mysterious new vigilante disappears. When Luke raced back to school to tell Russell of these events, he was shocked to find his friend purchased a drug called snakebite, turning him into a hulking brute, while Russ also constructed a series of bombs. Russell tells Luke that he plans on blowing up the levees protecting Gotham. If the already struggling levees are destroyed, the entire borough around them will go with it. Luke attempts to talk his friend down, but that only pushes Russ into outright attacking. Though vastly outmatched, Fox manages to wrestle the bomb's detonator from Russ's control, long enough for the police to arrive. In spite of Luke's best efforts, he's forced to detonate the bomb while it's in Russ's clutches, knocking the young man into the river. Russ was thought dead until he resurfaced years later. In the city of Metropolis, Clark Kent, reporter for the Daily Star, returns home after defeating a group called the Supremacists. He detects his neighbor putting on the news, as Clark is no ordinary young man. Using his X-ray vision and highly sensitive hearing, Clark learns of how the storm bearing down on Gotham City has escalated and grown into a Category 5 hurricane. The matters are made worse thanks to the Riddler's blackout. Kent, still on the path of forming his new identity as Superman, decides to help out. Though he can detect the presence of many rescue vehicles closing in on the troubled city, Clark Kent is aware his powers allow him to do things nobody else can. With the full extent of his abilities, and true nature largely unexplored and untested at this time, the young man decides to go beyond simple search and rescue, and aims to battle the storm itself. Still unable to fly, Superman catches a ride on a plane until he is able to dive into the ocean, swimming towards the storm. He begins rapidly swimming around the hurricane, creating a vortex around its own wind cyclone. Though the plan works at first, Kent soon gets overwhelmed and is unable to dissipate the storm, instead getting flung into the ocean. With the plan now aborted, Kent turns his attention to saving some rescuers and their ship from sinking, a ship that just so happens to have his childhood friend Lana Lang on board. As Kent moves on to help some other civilians trapped on the coast, he struggles to move some wreckage, feeling his powers have been drained from his attempts to fight the hurricane head-on. Luckily, with the help of the people he is saving, they are strong enough together. In a now darkened Gotham City, Batman is able to escape the pursuing police by using an early version of the Batmobile, which is able to drive along the ceiling of a tunnel directly over a police barrier. Elsewhere, Gordon comes to a disturbing crime scene, which apparently was observed, though not tampered with, by Batman. Gordon and Harvey Bullock investigate the scene themselves, where the victim had every one of their bones grow and twist out of control. Both men feel things are getting crazy in the city, but note that Batman was at this and another similar crime scene apparently looking into these deaths on his own. James mentions his frustration with the current situation. The Red Hood attacks already put the city and its resources under tremendous strain. The storm, now called Hurricane Ren, has officially become a superstorm event. Meanwhile, the GCPD is largely focused on chasing down Batman, meaning all the criminals, including many of the now costumed and superpowered individuals, are running rampant throughout the city, which continues to suffer blackouts thanks to the Riddler. Batman, though his methods may not be traditional, is becoming a sole source of hope for the city in what's becoming their darkest hour. In the Batcave, Bruce informs Alfred that he's seen to it that the bats won't damage the expensive equipment they've set up down here. They talk of how Riddler rigged a power surge, badly damaging Gotham's main power reactor, but repairs are already underway. Bruce, however, knows that Nigma is just getting started with whatever he has planned, and is likely to attack the power grid just as soon as it is repaired. Fortunately, Wayne has engineered a countermeasure he needs to quietly attach to Gotham's power hub. Alfred remains largely supportive, but gets quieter when Bruce observes he's gotten his first scar as Batman already, in his encounter with Red Hood 1. The two turn their attention to the recent murders, both of which involved people injected with some sort of formula that caused their bones to grow and change beyond control. Wayne is able to trace the formula to a scientist that used to work for Wayne Enterprises, but all records of the man have been erased. Bruce did, however, find evidence of a number of horrific experiments, and learned that whoever was behind them took to calling themselves Dr. Death. Bruce and Alfred climb out of the cave, only to be surprised when they see James Gordon is waiting for them. Jim compliments Bruce for his brave actions at Ace Chemicals, but Wayne is quick to brush off Gordon, informing the lieutenant that he knows of Gordon's role and covering up details behind his parents' murder. Though Gordon seems to regret whatever went down in the past, he pushes past this baggage, wanting to talk about the bone formula and know what exactly the two were doing crawling out of the ground. But on both counts, Bruce is again dismissive. He states they are running generators down in the caves, and when Gordon goes to investigate himself, he's attacked by a swarm of bats, fleeing the cave system. Later that night, Bruce goes to meet Lucius Fox, and the two greet each other warmly. Bruce knows that his father trusted Lucius more than anyone else at Wayne Enterprises, even calling Fox the smartest man the elder Wayne ever met. Wayne asks about one of the dead scientists, and Lucius admits he was involved in that research. Suddenly, Fox attacks Wayne with the syringe. As Bruce collapses to the ground, Lucius states that Dr. Death is coming, and nobody can stop them. In a movie theater, a young Dick Grayson watches a film when the lights go out once again. The crowd panics and Grayson is nearly trampled to death. He wakes up later and escapes with some fellow teenagers, while back at the circus Dick calls home. His parents worry, as the child went off into the city on his own without their permission. Meanwhile, a patient whose amygdala was being operated on escapes a hospital and attacks the kids wandering through the now darkened city. Inspired by the movie they were all watching, Grayson keeps the spirit up for the team by making masks for everybody and calling them a team of heroes during the journey. After a prolonged chase, Grayson manages to save his fellow teens and lure the man, a villain best referred to as Amygdala, to the rooftops, at which point the rampaging villain fell into an alleyway, knocking himself out. In the aftermath, Sal Maroni, a mob leader with hefty criminal ties throughout the city, is grateful to the circus, as Maroni's son was among the teens Grayson saved. Though Dick's parents are not pleased with him sneaking off, they are glad he is okay and unharmed. Grayson takes a lot from this experience, even using it as inspiration to develop a new team-based acrobatic routine he plans out with his friends, where they will all wear masks together, stating that sharing the spotlight on his own is overrated. As the city descends into chaos, before the superstorm even officially touches down on Gotham, Barbara Gordon finds herself in the middle of a riot. She is nearly shot over some basic supplies, and rushes home to inform her father, Police Lieutenant James Gordon. The elder Gordon has to leave, so he asks Barbara to look after the home and her younger brother, James Gordon Jr. Barbara begins to secure the homestead when, not long after James leaves, another officer shows up. The Gordon home and surrounding area have been designated an extended flood zone, and the neighborhood has been ordered to evacuate to higher ground. James Jr. and Barbara pack some things and soon head out, with Barbara even borrowing some of her father's police equipment, knowing it is all about to be lost to the storm soon anyways. The siblings go with everyone else being evacuated to a nearby fire station, where the gathered community is crammed into a tight place, quickly building tension between the people. Barbara does, however, meet a young man named Henry who is friendly towards the Gordons. She is unable to contact her father, which worries the young woman. James soon notices some water rising from the ground when suddenly the entire fire department is swallowed by a flooding sinkhole. Barbara is able to save her little brother, and though James insists they abandon the others, she is able to lead many into escaping the rising waters. The survivors make their way across some rooftops in an effort to avoid the flooding waters and reach some sort of safer area, when they witness a nearby offshoot of the city called Cold Light Island erupt into flames. Realizing the situation is only getting worse across Gotham, Henry tricks everyone into giving him their possessions, robbing the survivors and leaving them stranded on a rooftop. Barbara, learning she will have to be her own hero, not just for herself, but the city around her and these people, leaps after Henry and pins the man to the ground. Though nearly overpowered by the larger, older, and more experienced man, Barbara manages to knock him into the water, but the stolen goods are lost with him. Still, it earns her the respect of her fellow survivors, who turn their attention to the drowning city. At Gotham City Harbor, Marine John Stewart and his fellow squad mates are deployed to rescue what they are told are hundreds of civilians holding up at Seaside Coliseum. On the way in, they notice numerous anarchist symbols recently tagged in the area, but don't pay it much mind. At the stadium, they are greeted by civilians who take them to a man named Anarchy, a local leader who is taking control of a community now numbering in the thousands. Anarchy and his minions are able to overpower and capture the Marines, Stewart included, imprisoning them with other captured figures of authority along with some wealthy Gothamites. Working with these civilians and his fellow Marines, John is able to find a hidden trapdoor once used for a televised performance he witnessed at the stadium. The group manages to largely slip away unnoticed, until the last few exiting the cave. After a prolonged struggle, largely in the dark after Anarchy cuts the stadium's backup generator, the Marines manage to retrieve some weapons, though Stewart can barely stop his peers from killing Anarchy's men. This led to a standoff, with Anarchy holding the two Marines hostages, while the rest of the squad had Anarchy's men at gunpoint. Though this nearly leads to an outright firefight, John Stewart manages to use grenades to subdue Anarchy and talk everyone else down. This bold move works, and everyone begins safely evacuating as the storm still bears down on the city. Anarchy manages to escape with a booby trap rigged around his mask, but there is little the Marines can do with what time they have left before the storm finally touches down on Gotham. However, John Stewart's actions have left his fellow Marines dismayed, with his lieutenant, a man named Tasker, intent on court-martialing the man for using explosives in a way that could have endangered the rest of the squad. Though Stewart briefly considers it all a mistake, he reassures himself he did the right thing. Elsewhere, in Park Row, a particularly downtrodden and impoverished area of the city. The police presence has all but evaporated as Gotham falls into chaos. A young Jason Todd hasn't seen a cop in over a week, not since the blackout. He spends most of his time looking out for his drug-addicted mother, until one night when his friend Christopher stops by. Chris takes Jason out to show the young man 2 bodies he found a few blocks away. He excitedly shows Jason that the corpses of our high-ranking members of the Red Hood gang who potentially knew Red Hood 1, and talks of a meeting the survivors of this crew are supposed to be having tonight. Taking one of their masks, and not realizing he and Chris are being watched, Jason later encounters a group of men fighting a woman in a dark alley, and on a whim, he comes to her defense wearing a red hood. The woman is no ordinary citizen of Gotham though, but rather a famed and deadly assassin, Talia al Ghul. She is vaguely impressed by Jason's fighting abilities, as the teen has spent much of his youth watching old karate movies, but he is no match for a graduate from the League of Assassins. Preferring not to hurt what she recognizes as a 15-year-old, Talia spares the boy and only asks he tell her where she can find the rest of the Red Hood gang. Jason tells of rumors he heard of a meeting happening in the city later tonight, but knows little else. Talia has Jason show her where he thinks the meeting is, but knowing that Jason is not really part of the Red Hood gang, and, for reasons even Talia can't fully decipher, not wanting to see the young man get hurt, she decides to knock Jason out before going in on her own. Todd wakes up and finds a gruesome figure standing over him with a crowbar, and the teen barely escapes with his life. He rushes to the meeting, not knowing Chris decided to go on his own too, only to find Talia try, but fail, to take out the new leader of the Red Hood gang, using a specific maneuver that requires tremendous inner strength. Seeing this, Jason rushes in, and imitating her movements, Todd is able to successfully deliver a blow against the man, at which point Talia decapitates him. Al Ghul explains to Jason this new leader of the Red Hood gang was an immortal being known as one of the Untitled, creatures who wished to drag this world into the shadows. She, Jason, and Chris all escape the Red Hood gang, but before the gang can chase after the trio, they are all wiped out when the gruesome figure destroys the entire building and begins to laugh. Talia drops off the boys, but Chris is furious at Jason, feeling that Todd ruined their chances to make something of themselves as part of the Red Hood gang. Al Ghul, however, is thoroughly impressed by Todd, as he was able to deliver that martial arts move against the Entitled, which requires an extraordinary soul to do so. It's something even she couldn't do. As the woman leaves, she promises Jason they will meet again, while Todd returns the red hood Chris gave him, swearing he will make something out of himself one day, never becoming just another Red Hood. Elsewhere, Talia is greeted by their father. As they talk of these events, Ra's al Ghul is told there is so much more to Jason Todd than might first meet the eye. In another part of the city, Kate Kane, niece of Philip Kane, has come back to attend the funeral of her uncle, taking some time off from her studies at West Point. Hunkering down with her dad as the storm comes in, Kane states her wishes that she could do more for the people of her city. Her dad reminds the woman that her time and chance to help people will come soon enough. But Kate isn't willing to wait that long and sneaks out into the night. She goes to Wayne Manor, stealing a motorcycle from her cousin, Bruce Wayne, and races into the city to help anyone she can. Kane comes across a young boy and some jewel thieves. She tries to fight them off, but when she jumps into a swimming pool to evade some gunfire, Kane is hit by a stray bullet. The crooks pull her out of the water, only for her to turn on them and subdue the gang. However, just as she finishes the last one off, she is stopped by police officers, including a couple of Metro police detectives on leave to Gotham in order to help with the disaster. Then MPD Officer Sawyer is among those on the scene. Kate is taken to Gotham General Hospital where she recovers from the event with only a small scar to show for it. Though her father is quick to lecture her on the reckless behavior, when she dozes off on their way home, he can't help but express his admiration at the tremendous soldier his daughter is becoming. In the Badlands of Gotham City, Dinah Drake leads her class, having taken over the dojo after her teacher, Sensei Desmond, who recently passed away. She is menaced by local gangs who want the dojo's building for their own operations, and expect regular payments of protection money if Dinah wants to continue operating here. When the woman refuses, a fight ensues, leading Dinah to pummel the gang. They flee, and Drake resumes her class as if nothing has happened. Though the gang was fought off, it forces one of her students to drop out of the class as he lives nearby and fears reprisal. He is not the first student to have done this, leading Dinah to worry about whether or not she can keep the dojo going. Sensei Desmond took Dinah in when she was a young girl, and she not only misses him dearly, but desperately doesn't want to let his memory down by losing the gym. During the blackout, Dinah is on a subway car and helps civilians escape safely before returning to look after her home. When somebody throws a brick through the window, she finds widespread looting going on around the entire block. She tries to help where she can, but the situation is wildly chaotic, and Dinah can only do so much. The woman comes across an injured man, who gives her his phone and tells her to find someone named Lynch. As the man passes away in her arms, suddenly ninjas appear and attack the woman, forcing her to flee. Dinah spends hours on the run, with ninjas endlessly pursuing her. She is nearly overtaken when a group of armed men arrive and save her life. They are impressed with Dinah successfully identifying Lynch among them. She gives him the phone, and after some prodding, he tells her it's a valuable piece of technology connected to the Riddler's blackout attack. But as for the ninjas, that's a mystery to Lynch as well. The group takes her home only to find the dojo in flames, with Dinah in tears, and Lynch impressed with her resilience. He offers the woman a job and training within his organization. She leaves with the man and the others, determined to start over and make things better for the world, one person at a time. On the day of the worst blackout in Gotham City's history, Arnett Crocker, one of the most important businessmen in Gotham, whose company's size is only dwarfed by Wayne Enterprises, decides to throw a lavish party for the wealthy. To do so, he and his men rob a small local grocery store in broad daylight. Witnessing this is a young petty thief named Selina Kyle. Though she tried to stop Crocker at the time, she got into a fight with one of his goons and was badly beaten. So she chooses to use the blackout as an opportunity to get revenge. Using some stolen climbing gear, she infiltrates Crocker's party, though is nearly gunned down in her attempt to get in. The party is full of influential players in the world of Gotham that Kyle recognizes. This includes major crime leader Oswald Cobblepot, as well as actor Basil Karlo. There's also many extravagant attractions, including a live circus performance. Dressed in formal wear, Kyle quickly attracts the attention of Crocker, and witnesses him selling the powerful prototype battery that could help power buildings in Gotham throughout the Superstorm event, no matter what the Riddler does to Gotham's power. Selina is caught spying though, and Crocker, without hesitation, orders the young woman be put to death. Kyle manages to grab a whip she found at the party, and though this is her first time using such a weapon, she finds it very effective, boasting a natural talent for it. Selina uses this opportunity to subdue Crocker and his men, taking the batteries, including the ones powering Arnett's own building, and having the local grocer distribute them to her community. Kyle is happy and finds the experience truly inspirational, setting her sights on greater ambitions as a thief in the future. What matters most, however, is that this means everyone on her block will have power and heat. In the days to come, that could very well make the difference between life and death. Only a few weeks after graduating from Central City Police Academy, with a specialization in forensic science, Barry Allen is just settling into his new job in his home city's crime lab. When a call is put out for volunteers to help with the emergency in Gotham, even though he is brand new to the force, Allen is quick to volunteer. And so as the city braces for Superstorm Renee, Barry finds himself chasing down a drug addict, hooked on a dangerous new substance called Icarus that's recently appeared across Gotham City. When Allen corners the man, the addict takes the drug, grabs Barry's taser, and nearly shocks the rookie officer. Fortunately, he's rescued by two more experienced GCPD officers, Harvey Bullock and his partner Spencer. Bullock admonishes Barry for not using his weapon more readily, when suddenly, the drug addict erupts in flames. The fire is quickly extinguished thanks to the timely arrival of a Gotham Gazette intern named Iris West, but still, the man is killed in the process. Iris tells the police that this is what Icarus can do to people, so they go to the Gotham Free Clinic in an effort to learn more from another addict, until the building explodes immediately upon their arrival. Barry shocks Harvey when he bravely runs into the building to save as many people as he can, including Iris West, who just so happened to have been there at the time, impressing the young woman. The fire is apparently the result of another Icarus user outright exploding thanks to the superpowers the drug gave him. Doing more research together, Iris and Barry realize they grew up in the same area and nearly kiss, only for Alan not to pay attention and set an experiment on fire. This does give him an idea, and they head out to a pier Barry believes would have been used to reduce the risk of creating such a combustible drug. There, Barry and Iris witness Spencer working as part of this operation, but are caught at gunpoint by him. Luckily, Harvey Bullock arrives to help out, allowing Barry to save Iris from being shot by Spencer, but in turn Spencer decides to forcibly dose Barry with Icarus, wildly distorting Alan's senses, but granting him the strength to knock Spencer down. Thinking fast, Iris douses Barry with a cooling liquid to save him from burning up, while Bullock shoots Spencer. Alan barely survives the incident, but Spencer does not. For the sake of the crooked cop's ailing daughter, however, Bullock and Alan agree to protect his reputation by covering up the man's crimes, and allow him to have a heroic funeral under the false narrative that Spencer died stopping his own drug operation. Barry, still recovering, heads back to Central City, but not before finally getting a chance to kiss Iris West. Both are left thinking of a brighter future. A week into the blackout, and Bruce Wayne, having just returned to the public eye after that press conference, has gone missing once again. The looting and chaos in the city has grown, with thousands now reported missing. But another wealthy individual, thought dead to the world, has also returned. Oliver Queen, having been stranded on a remote island for years, has finally come back to his home in Seattle. Greeting and discussing this with Walter Emerson, acting CEO of Queen Industries, Oliver is informed that his mother Moira went to Gotham to help out on the front lines. Hearing this enraged Oliver, insisting that he go rescue her. This is lucky too, as Moira Queen and her security detail, including a man named Diggle, were definitely in danger, taken hostage by a masked criminal obsessed with moths. Oliver, not wanting his return to be public just yet, manages to sneak into the city along with archery gear, which Queen had become highly proficient with thanks to his time on the island. Donning a green tunic, and even experiencing an early encounter with the Dark Knight, Oliver is able to rescue his mother and her bodyguard Diggle. Moira instantly recognizes her son and embraces his return, but can't help but notice her child has been changed immensely by his experiences on that island. Collapsed on the ground, Bruce Wayne looks up at Carl Halfern, also known as Dr. Death. The villain grabs Lucius and nearly kills the scientist. Even though Fox just attacked him, Wayne leaps to his feet to help defend against this gruesome villain. Bruce manages to knock Halfern to the ground. Lucius apologizes to Bruce, explaining that he injected both himself and Wayne with a vaccine against Dr. Death's formula to protect them against Halfern's inevitable attack. Carl manages to catch up to them and nearly cracks Bruce's skull open when he is shot by James Gordon, who arrives on the scene. Dr. Death flees, and Bruce falls unconscious. He wakes up beside Alfred later with a broken skull and his leg handcuffed to a hospital bed. Gordon is still with them, demanding to know answers about Carl Halfern. Though he insists on working with Bruce to stop the villain, Wayne won't hear of it, instead focusing on the day his parents died, when he, as a child, witnessed Gordon take a bribe. When James tries to explain the situation, Bruce breaks free of his handcuffs, grabs Jim's gun, and points it at his face. Returning it to Gordon immediately, Bruce says that he will never trust Gordon or anyone from the GCPD and heads out with Alfred, saying if Gordon wants to stop them, he'll have to arrest the two. James then receives a note from the Riddler. Though still injured, Bruce sets out to protect those Halfern will be targeting, even as Gotham's Bay starts to flood. Superstorm Renee is on Gotham's doorstep. Batman arrives at a Wayne Enterprises facility to find he is too late, and multiple employees have been infected with the bone formula. while a group of police are on the scene waiting for him. Claiming Batman is drawing a weapon on the group and refusing to listen to one word from the vigilante, the cops open fire, and bullets rip through Batman. The officers are well prepared for the vigilante, equipped with gas masks that protect them against any smoke bombs the Dark Knight deploys. They purposefully target the man's head, shattering Batman's helmet and injuring his already traumatized skull. Bruce flees to his boat, only to find the cops have rigged it with explosives. Diving into the waters, Batman loses contact with Alfred and nearly dies in Gotham's Bay until Gordon arrives. He takes Batman to safety while removing his own glasses so Bruce can recover without his damaged mask on. Gordon tells Batman that the police were tipped off about the Dark Knight's location by the Riddler. When Bruce questions why Gordon would save him, he is shocked when Jim brings up Bruce Wayne. Jim, who has been thinking about the past since Bruce's return, talks about how he once naively accepted a gift in front of the child years ago, not realizing it was actually a bribe. Eventually he discovered it was so, and he and his partner were to look the other way while a tailor shop secretly conducted a dogfighting ring behind closed doors. When Gordon refused, his partner, Dan Corrigan, forced Jim into a dogfighting match himself. Gordon barely survived the encounter and nearly shot Corrigan in cold blood over the matter, but ultimately let things go when Dan and the others threatened Jim's daughter, Barbara. Jim has been able to do little to fight the corruption in Gotham in the years since, but he hasn't forgotten what these criminals have done to him, or others, like Bruce Wayne. And for the first time ever, Gordon truly believes that Batman could finally change things in this city. Batman warns Gordon, who still isn't wearing his glasses, to stop the boat, avoiding a crash into a nearby pier. When Gordon turns around, the Dark Knight is gone. In the Batcave, Bruce finishes up on the jammer that will stop the Riddler from taking control of Gotham's power any further. Alfred suggests that Bruce is struggling because he lacks allies, and even the butler himself doesn't feel terribly trusted by Wayne. Largely unresponsive to this, Batman instead deduces the location of Dr. Death from some trace residue on Batman's armor. He heads out to some old catacombs within Gotham, a popular tourist attraction that was completely abandoned during the blackout. Bruce finds Carl's secret lab there, but realizes that the Riddler has been working with this villain all along, using Dr. Death's murder spree as a cover while they built a massive weather balloon to strike out at the city. Just then, this is where Batman's story ends. As the city continues a desperate evacuation, Gordon receives a call from Batman, who emerges from a pile of bones, buried there by the Riddler and Dr. Death's trap. Batman directs the police lieutenant to Wayne Tower, where Riddler is planning to seize control over all the city's computer systems once the police turn the power back on. As for Batman, the city watches as a giant blimp appears in the stormy skies, a prototype of the ones used in Gotham developed by Wayne Tech. On board this bat blimp, Bruce contacts Alfred and explains that Nigma and Halfern worked together to create a weather balloon that would serve as a remote hacking hub in order to take over the city. It's also one nearly impossible to access in this storm. Meanwhile, Gordon contacts his old partner Dan Corrigan, who happens to be in charge of restoring Gotham's power. Because of the dark history between these two men, Corrigan is unwilling to hear of any warnings from Gordon regarding the Riddler. In the skies above, the storm breaks down the blimp, and Batman is forced to leap nearly 20 feet into the air so he can reach the weather balloon. And amidst all the lightning and torrential rain, the Dark Knight manages to get his grappling hook on top of the aircraft. There, he finds Dr. Death waiting for him, just as Gordon confronts the Riddler. Nigma springs a trap on Jim, nearly crushing the man to death with a massive boulder, while Dr. Death attacks Batman on the weather balloon. In the struggle, the Dark Knight drops the jammer he had prepared against the Riddler, and it flies off the balloon into the city below. The Dark Knight quickly beats Halfern down, who starts to rant about how his son was killed in an operation, on orders from Philip to seek out his long-lost nephew, Bruce Wayne. Though this shocks Batman, he manages to detonate an explosive on the weather balloon's console in an attempt to destroy it. Halfern is injured by this, and willingly dies rather than attempt to heal from his wounds, telling Batman to remember his story, while commenting that Bruce Wayne had the right idea of just giving up on this wretched city. Just then, the police restore power, while the Riddler quietly leaves Wayne Tower, prepared for his next plan. With the balloon still intact, Nigma seizes control of the city and destroys every retaining wall in an instant. Gotham is flooded with water, while the weather balloon and Gotham City's blimps are sent hurtling into the ground. Nearly a month later, Bruce wakes up, recovering in the home of a family known as the Thomases. One of the sons in the family, a young man named Duke, greets Bruce Wayne and welcomes him to a new year. The 0 year, as the Riddler has called it. Batman manages to contact Alfred, even though the Riddler is preventing most communications within the city, and he learns what has happened since he fell unconscious. With a special formula developed by a scientist named Dr. Pamela Isley, Edward Nygma has allowed the city center to become overgrown with wildlife. Meanwhile, about 10% of the city's protective barriers from flooding are completely gone. Tunnels in and around the city are flooded, bridges are rigged to explode, and if anyone comes in contact from the outside, Nygma will release balloons filled with toxic gas on those who do so. Under these circumstances, the city has fallen under Riddler's absolute authority. At the center of the city, anyone can engage in the disturbed villain by challenging him with a riddle, but so far Nygma has time and time again solved everyone's riddle, and upon doing so, he feeds the challenger to a pack of jackals from Gotham Zoo. Meanwhile, Gordon awaits the secret arrival of a small tactical troop. He is surprised to see only 5 men, commenting he expected and asked for far more, when suddenly they are accosted by a number of drones controlled by the Riddler. The soldiers reveal that the government is actually willing to go so far as to admit defeat, and they offer the villain a cash payout. Nygma responds by unleashing a chain reaction of buildings collapsing upon one another, nearly killing all the men save for the timely intervention of the Dark Knight, returned to action. Amidst the wreckage, James Gordon introduces the dismayed soldiers to Batman. On a rooftop, Lucius Fox thinks of his son, and he looks on, prepared to confront the Riddler on his own, when a figure appears before him, and the scientist immediately reconsiders his plans. Fox joins with Batman and Gordon, informing them that to maintain control of the city, the Riddler must be hiding somewhere within Gotham. And though the Riddler is being quite careful in hiding his tracks, Lucius is confident he could find the villain if they hook a device directly onto the tower being controlled by the Riddler in the center of the city. So Batman devises a plan where he will challenge the Riddler himself and keep Nygma busy while they set up the device. The Dark Knight goes to prepare, while the others stay in hiding. Later, the Riddler appears on the tower screens, awaiting a challenger, but none speak up, until they hear the sound of an engine roaring to life. Batman appears in broad daylight, in front of an astonished city, and accepts Nygma's challenge. Meanwhile, Lucius prepares the trace remotely, while Gordon infiltrates the tower and attaches their device that will allow them to do so. Once he finishes, Fox realizes and informs Batman through a secure radio channel that Edward will need to stay talking for nearly 20 minutes for the trace to complete. So Batman begins to tell his riddle, though Edward is smug and mocking, and repeatedly interrupts the Dark Knight. Still, Batman eventually begins his riddle with the story of a boy, so smart not even his parents realized it. He would hack into corporate accounts or government firewalls just to prove he could, yet his genius went unnoticed. Then he went to work for one of the most powerful people in the world, but nobody can notice his intelligence still. It's because the boy only cares about himself, and never uses his intelligence to help people meaningfully change the world. Knowing he is speaking of Nygma himself, the Riddler tries to turn this on Batman, saying under that cowl there must be some sort of disgruntled veteran, trying to suss out the identity of Bruce. When Batman says Nygma is wrong about him, Edward simply opens a trapdoor, and in response, Gordon jumps off the tower all the way down into Gotham's flooded subway systems to save the Dark Knight. As he is dropped into the pit below, the Riddler mentions he has upgraded the jackals, and Batman is attacked by a pair of lions. The Riddler watches as Batman fights a prolonged battle. Incredibly, Batman is able to defeat the lions, just as the tracking device finally finishes. Enigma drops an entire parking garage worth of cars on the Dark Knight, who is narrowly saved by Gordon. The trace leads them to a tunnel underneath the old tower used for Wayne Enterprises. Gordon, Batman, and the soldiers work together to try and trap the Riddler, approaching the location from different directions. Too late, Batman realizes this is yet another trap, with multiple armed robots waiting for them. In the battle against a drone, the Dark Knight is launched out of Wayne Tower and nearly careens to his death, while Lucius, still working remotely, is ambushed by another. Luckily, Batman is able to regroup with Fox and save the man's life, but they have no idea where the Riddler is really hiding. Bruce and Lucius, however, deduce the Riddler's master plan to destroy Gotham once and for all. By using explosives Nigma has rigged across the city, he plans to trick the government into inadvertently setting off a chain reaction of explosives once he lures them into doing a tactical missile strike. With the government frustrated at the situation and already preparing said strike, the two realize they have just 40 minutes left to save the city. Batman uses a pattern in the signal to correctly deduce the Riddler's true location, at the museum's Egypt exhibit, where the Sphinx replica is held. There, the Riddler applauds Batman, but warns the Dark Knight that the real game has just begun. Lasers surround the hero. Enigma explains that crossing them will trigger explosions across the city. He will, however, deactivate them for each riddle Batman correctly solves, out of a series of 12. Meanwhile, Gordon and Fox work to delay the jets and prevent them from bombing Gotham. With no other choice, Batman begins to correctly solve the riddles, one after the other. However, for the last one, the Dark Knight falters, apparently making an incorrect guess. But Batman reveals it is irrelevant. They have finally managed to block Edward Nygma's signal and control over the city, using Philip Kane's giant penny as a powerful conductor that is sending a jamming sequence across Gotham. No longer able to activate the explosives, Batman grabs Edward, just as Gordon manages to rig a rudimentary version of the bat signal to delay the jets. The Riddler reveals his final play though, that he's rigged control over the city to be turned directly to his own heartbeat. Once that connection is severed, the city's power and systems will go dead, and stay that way, having to be restored from scratch, until another person uses the electrode and reboots it with a massive electrical shock to their own body. Nygma mocks Batman, saying that he has at least a 1 in 1,000 chance of surviving it. Wordlessly, Batman grabs the electrode, knocks Nygma out, and shocks himself with 10,000 volts. The Dark Knight wakes up, revived by Alfred, and the city's power is finally restored. The military backs off, while the people of Gotham celebrate their city as it comes back to life. Bruce is shocked Alfred was able to find him in time, but the butler reveals he had been operating in the city during the entire 0 year, ready to intervene and help Batman if needed. The two enjoy a quiet moment together, as finally, at least for the moment, the city has some peace. After another month, Bruce Wayne is publicly leading a charge to rebuild the city, better than ever, with Lucius Fox at his side. The newly appointed police commissioner James Gordon warmly greets Wayne, who has found a new level of respect for Jim given everything that has happened. Nygma was deemed too risky to hold in Blackgate Prison, so he's being held in Arkham Asylum while the authorities figure out what to do with him. Gordon notices that someone appears to have quietly given him a new coat, asking if Batman said anything about it to Bruce Wayne, but the billionaire simply suggests it might be time for a new one, implying it is time to move on from Gotham's old days of corruption. Alfred informs Bruce that a woman has arrived, Julie Madison. When Wayne refuses to see her and Alfred presses the matter, Bruce quietly confesses to once, long ago, nearly seeking electroshock therapy to escape the memory of his parents' death. Since then, he has really struggled to find happiness and meaning, but now Batman gives him both of those things. Alfred says Bruce simply hasn't experienced true joy and love in his life, but Wayne retorts that will never be him. The butler begs Bruce to have just one drink with Julie, but he refuses. Looking over at the woman, Alfred sees Bruce sitting down with her and striking up a conversation, ostensibly just to be polite and let her go. But one thing leads to another, and pretty soon they're dating, eventually even starting a family of their own. Years later, a much older Wayne thanks Alfred for all of this, but the butler thinks nothing of it, having always been there for the man who became his son. In the real world, as his daydream ends, Alfred stands over the young woman and regretfully informs her that Bruce Wayne is spoken for.